Okay, we're now live, Chair.
Right, okay, thank you. Nice to see you, Alan. Right, welcome everybody to the Asset Management Board. So I said for those who were there at the beginning that my voice is not all it could be. So if anybody can't understand what I'm saying, please let me know. And if I turn my camera off and we've got my microphone off, it's because I'm coughing. Okay, so we, I think you said we had one apology, Sophie.
Apologies from Councillor Pritchard, Chair.
Thank you. And no substitute.
No substitute.
Okay, thanks. Okay, what's happening there? Right. Okay, so I'll move on to remind myself and Councillor Swift of the need to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests or other interests they might have in relation to items included on the agenda. And also to state that this meeting is open to the public, except that under section 100A bracket 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, it is recommended that the public be excluded for item number 11 on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in the stated paragraph of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act, namely financial and business affairs, paragraph 3. Okay, so if we can then move on to the minutes. Have you, I don't think you were at the last meeting, were you, Megan?
No, I wasn't.
No, okay. So as far as I'm concerned, they're a correct record and can be signed. Just in terms of matters arising, I noticed, well, there's a reference to community asset transfer resources, which I think we'll pick up later in the agenda. And I don't know if anybody wants, everybody seems to be disappearing before my eyes. Anybody just wants to confirm the good news in relation to the Mixenden Hub? Yeah, Janet?
Yeah, I can just confirm that from a project point of view that we've now tendered the construction delivery company and contracts have been exchanged and they are mobilising and will be started on site delivering the Mixenden Hub after the Easter break. So really good and positive news there that we see that moving forward for the communities up in North Halifax there.
Yeah, that's really good news. It just seemed to be agonising waiting for the contracts to be exchanged.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. And also,
sorry, Chair. If I could just come in before you move on, we do need 2 members to propose and second the minutes. So
okay.
if anyone joins later, we could postpone them till later, or it'll need to be the next meeting.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine.
Thank you.
Okay. And just also, I think in the minutes there was reference to children's homes, and I think there's been movement there. I think probably since those minutes. Well, since that meeting, in that there is now a further home in the pipeline. Is that, if anybody can just update on that?
Sorry, folks.
Anybody?
Yes, thanks, Chair. We're actively exploring a potential property that's become available within the council's portfolio, which not only should streamline the process subject to various sort of consultations that we need to undertake and planning permission, etc., but also should significantly reduce the costs as well, should that be successful. So we're quite optimistic about that, Chair, and that should help to move us forward to achieve the goal that we've set to acquire 2 residential homes to add to the council's portfolio.
Excellent, thank you for that. Okay, so then if we can move on to item 5, the revenue budget monitoring call.
Thank you, Chair. I'll introduce this item if I can. Hopefully there's enough information in the report, but I'll just like to run through a few things. So the overall net budget for CAFM is 9 million, and there's a buildings budget of 7 million, in the region of 7 million, and a service control budget of 2 million. The main headings within the budget are employees, round about 3 million. Energy, you can imagine energy is a significant budget, round about 2 million. just over 1.8 million for it to deliver the repairs within the programme, and rent and rates accounts for another 1.4 million. So those are the four main headings within the budget. Just something about the budget generally. It's mentioned in the report, but there's a requirement for the CAFM to deliver savings of £4 million on an ongoing basis, just to maintain a level budget. The report provides an update on the forecast that was reported to Cabinet in January, Chair. Now that forecast was based in late October, early November. The latest monitor brings it up to date and is the forecast outturn for the year. At this point, we're forecasting an overall budget pressure of just over 1 million, and 1.5 million of that is relating to energy. I think all members of the board are aware of the issues around energy that all councils are facing this year, and the significant increases that were announced early in the financial year. So energy is coming in at 1.5 million. The overall net budget pressure is just over 1 million. So that means that overall, CAFM have met the £4 million savings target, and they've also contributed £500,000 towards the energy cost. It does leave an issue that will be reported to Cabinet later in the year, Chair. And I think although the report to Cabinet in January detailed the overall budget pressure of 5 million for the council, it will be for Cabinet to decide in June, when they receive the outturn, how they're going to deal with that overall overspend. So the budget pressure of 1 million for CAFM will be reported in the overall budget pressure for the Region and Strategy Directorate. But overall, the overriding message is that CAFM have contributed £500,000 of savings in addition to the 4 million, and towards the 1.5 million in energy, for the reasons detailed in the report. I'll be happy to answer any questions generally about the financial position.
Okay, Megan, do you have any questions? No. Okay, so just in terms of the energy then, I seem to recall last time we were still waiting to renegotiate a new contract with YPO, and has that happened yet, or is it still in the process?
No, that's happened, Chair. Just a reminder on that, the council purchases energy through YPO. The gas contract runs until March 25. The council has now renewed the contract with YPO for another 2 years, so it was renewed in January. So YPO are now responsible for purchasing all the energy on behalf of the council, and that includes the council's street lighting assets, any other energy relating to service control properties that are outside the remit of CAFM, and of course the corporate estate. But that contract is now in place, Chair. Just one thing about energy generally, in that the council has provided in its budget council, it agreed to some growth around energy generally. There's another 2.3 million gone into the budget. 1.9 million of that was to meet the potential budget pressure that we're reporting for the current year across the council. There's another 400,000 for energy inflation in 23-24. I think it rises, Chair, to about 800,000 in 25-26. There are still issues to be resolved in terms of where the council is going in relation to energy and the corporate estate, street light and the rest of it. The government's announced a new energy relief scheme, but I think it's fair to say at this stage, Chair, that we think it's aimed more at business than local authorities. So at this stage, we are unsure about what the energy price cap may mean in relation to local councils, the corporate estate and the street lighting assets. But the council has provided 2.3 million in addition to the budget that we've already had for future years. But I think there's further work needed, Chair, to assess what the impact is on the council as a whole, on what it means for the CAFM service. But the contracts are in place. I know that YPO have purchased some energy already, but I think there's a lot of things to go into the calculation yet to see what it means for the council, and whether the 2.3 million that's been provided will be sufficient across the council's estate.
Okay, thank you. And so we know that we've had a number of heat pumps installed, and also solar panels on the Todmorden pool. So in the medium to long term, that's going to help us with our energy bills, presumably, whatever happens to prices.
Yeah, just one thing on the heat pumps, it does change the energy from, I think, gas to electricity.
Yeah.
We did mention that in the report, Chair, when they were approved, and I think the council's obviously very conscious about its carbon footprint, and it does move us a significant way from gas into electricity, and it meets that objective. But it's just one of a number of factors that will feed into what our energy cost is next year. But obviously our carbon footprint will reduce significantly as a reduce of that investment that the council approved.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So that report is just for noting. So it is duly noted. And we can, so thank you for that, Paul. So we can then move on to item 6. Thank you, Janet, the update on the capital construction project.
Thank you, Chair. Similar to Paul, and the report I've provided you gives an overview of the progress over since we last met and discussed them. Majority there, as you can see, is regard now with the Future High Street funding stream, which is currently live, and we're at delivery stage on those projects. We've discussed Mixenden as well, which I will provide further details at the next meeting as well of programmes and that sort of thing there for you to review. I need to highlight again, which I've been doing for some time, which is in my financial implications note, that about the ongoing turbulent construction market we're working in, which CAFM colleagues see the same on their side as well. We can see sector-wide now some improvement in that inflation appears at the moment to be plateauing, but this is just where we are at this point in time. And as we've seen over the last 2 to 3 years, it can substantially increase or decrease at any time as well. And this obviously doesn't compensate for the impacts we've felt over the last 2 to 3 years as well. Unfortunately, it's plateauing, but at the moment not going down. So we're not seeing any improvement there on the costings that are coming through. But what we have got at the moment, which is going to give us a good idea of, in-depth idea of the market, is with the Future High Street Fund, with a couple of contracts that are out for tender at the moment. That'll give us live, actual about the availability, because one has been the availability of contractors. We've seen a reduction we've seen some businesses folding over the last 12 to 2 years, particularly in the smaller sectors, which is where this is particularly aimed on the Future High Street Fund. So it's almost interesting and nail biting at the same time while we send these tender processes to see what comes back, but it indicates for us then exactly how the market is working. So good progress generally, as you can see on the individual items moving forward, particularly on Future High Street on the Borough Market there. If you've walked through at all, you'll see the work that CAFM are leading there with the roofing replacement, which is in one area that's being completed. The difference in the light that's coming through is absolutely amazing. So it's great to see these things moving forward. Victoria Theatre, the design work is completed there for the new accessibility routes, and that will be going out to tender in April for the lifts that will be going in there and the work that's going to be going on. And also to highlight on the public realm, that's taken a lot of pulling together from the point of view, it's George's Square. And there's lots going on in George's Square when you walk through there that you don't realise until you start to look at these things. So there's the linking with the bus services, linking with the taxi services, and that's all been going on with the design work there. We expect that to go out to tender towards the end of May. What we've chatted with Alan earlier last week, and we will extend the update that I give you now because I cover the majority of the capital projects in the whole of Calderdale. So for the next meeting, I will also include about the Towns Fund, so the Brighouse Towns Fund and the Todmorden Towns Fund as well. So you'll receive that information as well. Basically open to questions if anybody's got any questions.
Right, thank you. So I was just going to ask, I was going to ask what impact on contracting was being had by the fact that there's all these projects going on across the country all of the time.
Yeah, no, that's no problem. I'll stay on until you tell me different. Because
we're actually also losing contractors that were there, so that's just making it even more challenging, presumably.
It's exactly that. So with inflation increases impact from a cost point of view, but then that it has got narrower as that availability of construction contractors. We do highlight this regularly back to our colleagues at central government at DLUC, because it's almost the way that we receive that funding now is, as you're saying there, is the same throughout the country. So certainly on the larger scale projects that we're doing, you're against other people around the country bidding for the same contractors to do the same sort of work. So it adds to the pressure of what we're trying to do and what we're trying to deliver. And until we get to that tender series and we can get out there, it's seeing what the availability is. It's been positive in that we've done a couple of tests. What we're doing now as well is before we go out to tender, we sometimes test the market as well. And we've just done that on the Victoria Theatre, and we're quite surprised how many we've received back that have acknowledged an interest in the project even before it's gone out for tender as well. So it's not all doom and gloom, and it does seem to be in pockets. And until you physically get out there, you almost can't test that. It's very anecdotal until you physically get it out there with your tenders.
Yeah, okay. Megan, is there anything you want to ask? No? Okay. Right, I don't think I've got any further questions from that, except that it all seems, given the problems that we have, the things that you've discussed, we seem to be able to make pretty good progress in all the circumstances, I would say. So again, I think I'll just mark that, I'll take that report to noted and move on to item 7, the asset review programme Q4, which is you, Steve.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Dacre. So again, just the main points of the report, really. We mentioned last time that some of the items have been put on hold because of the vacant post of the asset planning manager. We have appointed a new asset planning manager who will start in post tomorrow. So we will be starting to kick some of those elements of work off again. Obviously, there will be a little bit of time for the person to get settled into the post, but that will include the depot strategy, which is one that we'll be looking at on one of the first ones. I think just in terms of the main things, Queen's Road Neighbourhood Centre, it was reported at the last meeting that was going to Cabinet. There was a decision taken at Cabinet in December to offer as a community asset transfer, and that information has gone out to interested parties. We have given a 3-month deadline of, I think it's the 7th or the 9th of May, so beginning to middle of May, for outline business cases to come back, and we have a meeting with one interested party tomorrow to discuss that further. Also mentioned in the last meeting that we were working closely with the integrated commissioning team on the Children's Centre service review, which is ongoing, and we've just had the approval to do the condition surveys to be able to do a great deal more of that work, so we can understand the condition of the existing properties, so we can, when they're looking to go out to tender, we can have the full information there. Just moving on to the office accommodation strategy, Horton Street is now complete and opened on time at the beginning of January, which was an excellent piece of work which is carried out by the team, which has allowed for the front-facing element to be opened back up to the public. The multi-house we mentioned last time, we'd do elements of that we'd pause due to the electrical vehicle charging project. We're going to review that because some of those are mainly kind of storage elements. So we're going to review that once the asset planning manager's back in post to see whether we can run those alongside. And then just in respect of now that the Customer First is back open at Horton Street, that's released a building at 42 Market Street, which we have got now on the market to let. So I mentioned the depot strategy, which we'll commencing earnest in the next month or so. And I think, Councillor Dacre, that's the majority of the highlights.
Okay, Megan, any questions?
Yes, sorry, I'm totally confused about where the council was before it went back to Oh dear. Before it went back to Orton Street, I've lost that bit in the thread. Can somebody explain?
No, that's fine, Councillor Swift. So there was a decision originally taken during the lockdown period that the council would not have any more public-facing buildings. Then there has been, subsequent to that, a decision made to provide that offering again. So we've reopened the customer first part of the building on a reduced basis, but so there is now some public facing element.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So the new asset manager, was that internal or the local authority or from outside local authorities, just out of interest?
It is internal from within the team.
Good.
So hopefully we'll have some continuity there.
Yeah, that's good to hear. But that presumably means you now need to fill that post.
Yes,
Yeah.
we're looking at that at the moment as to how, if we need to change that in any way. So we'll be working through that.
Okay. Anyway, congratulations to them. And just remind me, what was you referred to the work at Topperton Library being complete and the locality touchdown point. I've got confused about what was the most recent work. I mean, I know the roof was done, but there was work done inside as well, wasn't there? Apart from the touchdown point.
I think from memory, and the Elaine may be able to confirm, there was some structural issues with regards to the roof. I think with regards to the concrete panels on the roof, which is also done.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. The situation is that there are still issues with the roof, and there's some works planned once the weather gets better, probably in April now, to have a relook at the roof, because there are. It was determined that the structural problems weren't such that we had to replace the roof, but we have to keep monitoring it, and also that we're going to do some temporary work, or not temporary, some works just to solve a problem at the moment with water ingress in there. So that's where we're at the moment.
Right, but was it pain? I mean, it seems to me to be a lot. I mean, it was a long time when I didn't go in because of COVID, but when I went in there last, it just seemed to be an awful lot brighter and in there, as if it had been repainted as well. But
oh, you're testing my memory now. I think we may have done some work, certainly to what used to be the reading area, I think, to one side, and there was some reconfiguration. So I think we worked with the service just to brighten it up a little bit.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Right. No, that's lovely. So thank you for all of that. And again, we can, when you say that there's just a bit of you talked about Much House and the charging points. Is that because, do you want to say anything more about that, or is it not really something that you can?
No, I can explain a little bit, Councillor Dacre. Effectively what we have is we were looking at putting some storage options within the car parking area for some of the services that require some storage. The car park is likely to be required as part of the electric vehicle project. It's one of our kind of key areas where we could install quite a few charging points for the vehicles, because actually the vehicles and vans are located down there as well. So what we didn't want to do was do any particular works which may affect that. So do the works and then in kind of a year or so's time maybe have to kind of redo those works. So we're hopeful that if we can have a look at it, we may be able to do something alongside that won't affect that, but it just means we've got to kind of make sure that we're liaising with the right people.
Okay, thank you for that. Right, so yes, I think we can move on from that. Thank you very much, Steve, and again, thanks for all the work that's been done on all of those issues. So that takes us on to you again, Steve. No, it doesn't. Hang on, what's going on here?
Yes, I think I'm next one, Councillor Dacre.
Yeah, but the asset management strategy? No, it's the CAP monitor, isn't it?
Yes, it should be.
Yeah, sorry, I had to make the CAP monitor. I can't. struggle. I must have scrolled past it. Yes, it's because it's so short. I've scrolled past it without realising. Yeah, okay. So yes, Community Asset Transfer Monitor then, Steve, please.
That's fine. You mentioned in the last minutes, Calderdale, about the resource which was mentioned last time, which still is an issue for the team and to deal with community asset transfers generally. What we have done in respect of the 4 we have on at the moment, which are the 3 libraries and the museum, which are at varying stages of the lease, we have used some other resource within the asset management team and within Sharon Rogers' policy team to try and get those over the line in terms of the joint working agreements and agreeing the milestones and objectives to go into those agreements with the group. So on a short-term basis, we're managing to kind of mend and make do with the things that we need to get across the line in terms of the new ones. As mentioned in the report, there's a high-level officer review of the arrangements is taking place, and we are being asked to take a report to CLT later in the month, which is actually going to the Regeneration and Strategy Directorate Management team tomorrow, which looks at ways we can potentially improve the asset transfer process or the resource that we require to be able to do that. So we'll be kind of working through that with looking at the different things we may be able to do, and then taking feedback from the relevant people within the wider team and council. I've mentioned last time that London Foot Community Association group had been in touch with regards to potentially handing the building back, or they'd had a condition report. The back end of last week, we were informed by them that they had obtained the condition report. In fact, this morning I had an email from them to say that they are potentially they've had a couple of meetings with regards to this, and they're speaking with the users of the building to see whether that's something that they potentially may want to hand back to the council. So we're in initial discussion with them, and are looking at the condition report ourselves and just seeing if there's some advice we may be able to give in respect of that. Ultimately, the terms of the lease provide for the the group to be responsible. In fact, that's the reason why we give these buildings over, so the groups can get funding to improve the buildings. So we'll keep the relevant people updated in respect of that. I think there's a meeting on the 23rd of March, which we've been asked if we want to go to. We've offered for somebody to be up there if they can just give us some more information as to the role they'd like us to play at that meeting. Just mentioned there about the 4 transfers of 3 libraries and the museum, so they're progressing. The other 2 transfers which were part of that bulk that we did at the same time, Shelf Village Hall, we're expecting further information back by the end of April in respect of further information on their business case, and the business case for Mytham Royd Library, the enhanced business case was received yesterday. So that's now for officers to evaluate that within the next 2 or 3 weeks. And then finally, Foundry Street, which is an ongoing one at the moment. We received the full business case in January, just before Christmas, and officers are in the process of evaluating. Some of us have evaluated. We're just waiting for one officer to finish their evaluation, and we have a meeting on Friday with the delegated councillors and officers in terms of who have the delegated authority to go through that assessment and obtain authority either to proceed or not.
Okay. Megan, is there anything you want to say? Okay. So, in some ways, yes, it's obviously very difficult for you all at the moment trying to manage these, but in fact, there is quite a lot going on. And to me, that's, well, again, it's testament to you all for trying really hard in very difficult circumstances to keep some of these moving. And I hope that in the next meeting we'll be able to hear about how it might be able to, how the whole system might move forward in the future. What was I just going to say? How long have London Foot had that building, the Civic Centre? How long has that been?
I think from memory, I had a quick look at the lease last week. It was 2013, mid 2013. Now, originally it was a shorter lease. It was a then changed into a 125-year lease, so they could try and obtain funding. So we're looking at 10 years effectively.
Yeah, and I mean, presumably part of what the council needs to know is, have any efforts been made to obtain the funding to deal with these issues, and whether there was funding that could have been applied for but hasn't, or...
That's right, and I think it's trying to understand whether the group, so the group previously we had mentioned, like several groups with asset transfers, tends from time to time to have issues with kind of governance and capacity. In terms of it, you know, we've mentioned this before, it tends to be a handful of people who deal with everything, and sometimes it's 2 or 3 people. So it's really a case of you know, do the current governance, the current board have the will, and you know, that's something they're wanting to do to take this forward, because it's a long and arduous process. One, you know, obtaining the funding is the relatively easy bit, but in terms of overseeing the works and making sure the works are done correctly, etc., is obviously probably sometimes quite difficult for people who haven't got the background in those areas.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So yes, I think again, note that and note the efforts being made to keep going with that in difficult circumstances. Thank you. So which does then take us on to the asset management strategy and the delivery plan. Item 9. Is this you, Alan?
It is, thanks, Chair. As you can see, the Q3 monitor remains generally positive. We've already discussed several of the key areas of activity. The community asset transfer review of the policy is one of those, and I'll just touch on that later and just reinforce what Steve's already said. Of the 13 current live actions, 10 remain on track. And as I think I said last time, very often we skip over the greens, the things that are happening and progressing. I think it is worth just highlighting one update since the end of Q3 around the application to the Net Zero Regional Accelerator, which at the time of the report being written, we'd submitted the application and we were awaiting the decision. That has been approved, which is fantastic news, and it means that we can progress for the feasibility studies and initial designs for Halifax Borough Market, Victoria Theatre and potentially Heath Campus, which again keeps our pipeline of new opportunities to decarbonise the estate working through. So we've got schemes that are reaching completion, we've got schemes that are progressing, and we've got the next tranche of schemes that are being worked up ready for the next funding opportunities as and when they arise. So again, we've got some real momentum around that whole area of activity. And as you said earlier, Chair, it future-proofs the estate just in terms of our carbon footprint, but also in terms of future energy costs. It helps us to kind of tackle some of those issues. So it's a key area of work for us and an area that we've given an awful lot of focus to. A couple of the actions have been identified as amber at this stage, so just early warning signs for us, just to keep an eye on those things. The first of those relates to a key development to make better use of the wealth of data that we have. 5 years ago or so, we introduced a brand new asset management maintenance system, TF Cloud, which we probably don't talk enough about. We completely revolutionised the way that we operate, and actually over the last 5 years we've built up a really detailed picture of the spend and the issues and the status of not just the estate but the component parts of buildings. So we've got a whole raft of information. And we only really use a small part of that at the moment. So there's a big focus for us over the next period to look at how we can better use that information to become a much more intelligence-led service and organisation. To do that, we require some capacity. We've factored that into our new structure, but there's a time scale that's required to put that capacity and expertise in place. So over the next period, we expect that work to start to move forward and to start to build that picture. The second Amber action relates to the implementation of the new FM support structure, which is just slightly behind schedule. We were hoping to have that complete and implemented prior to Christmas. In fact, we had a meeting with the remaining staff who were affected by that restructure last week, and we're hoping to bring that to a conclusion very soon. All that means is that it's delayed some of the progress that we want to make in that area of work. We're managing the impact in the short term. There are no significant issues with that. This is about improvement. This is about greater efficiency. It's about improved operation. So it's just delayed the improvements that we want to make, but we are confident that we're going to be in a really good place to be able to move forward at pace on that. And I'm genuinely really excited about the opportunities that presents to us over the next period. There's one red action which we've talked about, which is the review of the community management of assets policy and the supporting arrangements. As Steve said, we've done a bit of an interim high-level review with some suggested tweaks and improvements to the approach, which is due to be discussed over the next few weeks. That's in lieu of a much more detailed formal review of the whole policy and procedure, which, as we've said, will require some resource, and this is almost a precursor to that, to tee that up and to think about how we create the resource and the capacity to be able to take the fuller review forward. But in the short term, we hope to make some adjustments to the approach, which will help us to streamline arrangements moving forward. That said, I think I said this last time, it has been quite an unusual set of circumstances where we've had such a large number of requests for community asset transfers that we've been working through at the same time, which isn't typical of our approach. So it is slightly skewed, if you like, to make judgments about the kind of the current demands. But nevertheless, there are things we think we can do to improve the process moving forwards. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Megan, any questions? You need to take yourself off mute.
There. That was so you wouldn't hear me coughing. Sorry. And we'll say no questions at this point, or else I'm going to choke.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, so when you say that the current review, therefore, of the CAP is a sort of interim one, have you any idea how long it would then take before you might be in a position to do the fuller review?
So I think through the interim set of conversations, what we need to do is to kind of flag up and quantify the level of resource that would be required to do the kind of the fuller, more detailed, to do a full review of the policy. Clearly, we need to engage fully with all stakeholders. So that's about the voluntary and community sector. It's about the groups that have been through the process in the last 12 months, 2 years. So there's quite a lot of engagement and consultation that will be required that will need resourcing. So as I say, I would see the conversation and the kind of the framing of what's required to come out of this initial set of conversations, after which then we'll have a clearer idea of kind of timescales and as said, the resource that's required to be able to deliver that. As we've said previously, this is not just, I accept we've got a significant role to play in it, this is not just a kind of a CAFM asset management function. There are implications for a much wider group of services across the organisation. So it's really important that if we're going to take a full review of this, it needs to be much more holistic and take account of the roles, responsibilities, the capacity, the expertise that we have around the whole process, and also the support that's provided to community groups through some of our voluntary sector partners. So again, there'd be work to do with them to think about, how we can better support them to support us, and also looking beyond our own set of arrangements and looking out there for best practice from other parts of the country. So I say there'd be a number of elements that would need to be undertaken in parallel to do a full review. We just need to kind of quantify what's required to be able to take that forward, and then we can start to put together a timeline for delivery.
Okay. And when you mentioned that there's been an unusual number, that's partly because we're still trying to tackle the ones arising from the Future Council, presumably, where
That's right.
quantity of buildings came forward at once.
They did, and in fact, through the initial piece of work that we've done, some of the feedback from locality who've supported some of the organisations has been almost the sector wasn't prepared for the volume that came at that time, and in fact, for them to be able to support a handful of community groups going through this process at the same time left them quite stretched. Yeah. So as I say, there are a number of facets to this. It isn't purely about the timeline for our process. It's about how we might tee these things up, how we might build capacity in the community and voluntary sector to be able to be ready and willing and able to be able to respond to opportunities as and when they arise. So say it's multifaceted, and that's why it just needs a little bit more time to kind of think through what that would look like to be able to take that forward.
Yeah, thank you. In terms of the working up the schemes for zero carbon, certainly at leaders briefing, I think it's been in the past, it's been talked about the need, we've talked about the need to have a pipeline of all sorts of capital projects for when these bids come up. So are there lessons to be learned from how you're going to be going about zero carbon ones that can be used in the rest of the council for putting together pipelines of pulling together a sort of the basic information so that we're ready to bid when the occasion arises?
Yeah, there's. I think you're right, Chair. I think there are potentially wider opportunities. I think it would require a little bit of a rethink about the way that we approach, because of course, again, the capital schemes go far beyond our service. This is a kind of an organisational requirement. So it's, how do we identify the opportunities to bid? What part of the organisation does that? How do we make sure that we're aware of opportunities? And as part of that, one of the things that we talked about previously is, how do we decide that the bidding opportunities are appropriate or not? Because sometimes actually it's the more bolder decision to make, said, you know what, that's just not right for us at this point in time. Therefore, we're not chasing money for the sake of the money being there. It's actually got to fit with our policies, our priorities, the approach and the key developments that we want to take forward. So yeah, there are a number of things that we need to consider, which is A, how we identify and spot the appropriate opportunities. We've been quite, I suppose, the decarbonisation approach is, we've been quite fortunate in that the net zero regional accelerator I just talked about is funding that's available to allow us to work up feasibility studies. That isn't always the case. And feasibility studies tend to be revenue costs rather than capital costs. So there is something about, if we're going to upstream our approach to some of this, then, and some of this possibly, maybe it's too early to pick up this conversation, this might be something that we come back to. I think one of the findings of the recent peer review that we've had is thinking about how we better use the resource that we've got. We're a bit bolder about opportunities and grasping those. And so I think that there may be some things that we need to think about on the back of the feedback that we've had and wider opportunities. And as you say, pockets of learning and good practice that we have in the organisation to have a much more holistic approach about not just delivering what we have now, but looking ahead at future opportunities, how we identify, how we bring those through, so that we've almost got this kind of conveyor belt of schemes that are at various stages of delivery.
Thanks. Yes, I think that I was going to refer to the peer review because, yeah, it's clear that they think that we need to be a bit more effective at thinking about these things strategically. And it is so difficult when everybody's got a lot to do. And it's also, you've all referred a few times to cross-directorate requirements, and I know it's always so hard trying to work across directorates, and even if everybody really wants to do it, it's nevertheless it's always challenging. So but it should be possible to, there's obviously more and more of a need for it, and so yes, we need to be getting better at having a structure for doing that, I think.
That's right. Just on that, Chair, just take an opportunity. It is quite interesting because actually, as a cross-council service, we do find, you're right, it's getting that balance right about shared priorities and actually a shared understanding of competing priorities and taking a view about, what needs to be delivered now and what might be delayed or pushed back. So, for example, there are a number of, Steve mentioned earlier, the electric vehicle charging points, implications for us as a property service in that ostensibly kind of a transport driven scheme. There is a key role for us. There's a current review of the waste services contract, again, property implications. We're at the table on that and we're engaging in those conversations. I think Steve referred to the children's centres and the family hubs. We've talked about the children's homes. So by our very nature, I've described, as I was in a session with some of the team last week, and I talked about, the CAFM service, by design, touches every part of the organisation. So you might say, maybe I would say this, wouldn't I? We are an example of a cross-directorate service, just because we support the whole organisation in the role that we have. So no, you're absolutely right. I think there's more that we need to do on that as an organisation.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And it is just pleasing again to see that it's nearly all green on there. So thank you again for all the work that's gone into achieve that. Which brings us on to item 10, the work programme, before we go to the last item, which is the exempt one. So pretty standard stuff on the next agenda. I don't think there's any need to add anything into that at the moment. So we'll just leave it, I think, as things as they stand for now. Unless anybody's got anything you want to add. Okay, so in that case, Sophie, can you turn the live stream